Death Note is a story whose plot centers around an intense battle between two intellectual behemoths. The teenager Light Yagami, who becomes a serial killer hell-bent on making the world free from crime, and L, the greatest detective in the world. Naturally, with their entire battle being an immense mental chess game between two geniuses, a very debated topic is centered around determining who out of these two is a truly intellectual superior one. Many people tend to take the side of L, because Light apparently needed supernatural help, plus L didn't make mistakes, both of which I thoroughly disagree with, the former of which I'll address later in the video. But in this video, I'll be taking into account different psychologists' theories on what intelligence is while looking at how these two behave throughout the series to come to a conclusive answer. Before actually tackling all that, let me briefly discuss the battle between Light and L. Was it fair? So many people stand by the notion that the game was unfair and rigged against L, who doesn't have knowledge of the Death Note and Shinigami, Light's main powers, meaning it would be difficult for him to properly counter Light's moves, and that Light apparently had the help of two Shinigami and someone with the Shinigami eyes. I don't find this claim to be particularly valid. Ryuk wouldn't have been a help for Light, considering he's simply a spectator, if Light wasn't clever enough to have Ryuk help him on occasion. Misa having the Shinigami eyes is also something I like to point out as completely fair, because Misa was a potential asset for either Light or L. By the time L introduced himself to Light and invited him to join the task force, they were at a complete stalemate. Light and L were equally close to each other. Light knew L's face but needed to learn his name, while L learned Light was Kira but needed to prove it. They were both halfway through defeating the other. Misa was a new and necessary force in order to put an end to that stalemate. Once she came into the picture, it was essentially a race between Light and L to gain this new and powerful resource. L would gain lots of clues about Kira, and Light would gain the Shinigami eyes. Of course, in the end, Light managed to play his cards right and gain Misa as an asset before L did. But unfortunately for Light, Misa ended up being a double-edged sword for him, akin to that of the task force with L. Misa is an extreme asset for Light because of her Shinigami eyes, which grant her the ability to kill L instantly, but at the same time she's as much of a danger because she's extremely reckless and her love is selfish, so she doesn't obey Light as much, such as when she met him way too early against his orders simply because she felt like it, which led to L learning about her existence, which led to her being arrested for being the second Kira, which forced Light to enact a plan taking place throughout the Yotsuba arc. The similarities between her and the task force are even more clear when you consider that L tried to defeat Light through Misa, similar to how Light tried to defeat L through the task force. Now, one might say that the race to get Misa was unfair against Light, since Light won the race but ended up getting a double-edged sword, while L would have gained a massive advantage with no downsides, except the race was kind of rigged for Light from the start, since Misa, the goal was trying to actually have Light find her first. You could even say that the concept of Light and L having the race was a red herring of sorts. Finally, I never got how Rem assisting Light actually degrades Light's capabilities. In fact, I think it actually further testifies them. Rem was a huge threat to Light, with the constant looming threats to kill him. If she wasn't constantly threatening him, Light would not only have much less pressure, but the main reason as to why Light was forced to enact his plan spanning throughout the Yotsuba arc was because of Rem threatening to kill him. After all, Light would have simply killed Misa through suicide and cleared his name, when L would have called him for questioning, concerning L had no real evidence against Light. Rem is not an asset to Light as much as she is some deadly third party breathing down his neck and causing some trouble for him. The fact that he managed to even identify what aspect of her caused trouble for him and brilliantly used that against L was extremely impressive on its own. In other words, Light excels in resourcefulness. He had a neutral spectator work for him, he managed to gain control over someone who was reckless and didn't obey him, and most impressively, he had taken advantage of a variable in the game working against him and used it to severely work in his favor. All Light really had was simply the Death Note, which was just a one limited killing power. Meanwhile, L had billions of dollars, an extremely intelligent and versatile subordinate who's able to do anything. He can easily contact extremely powerful organizations like the FBI, can control the police at will, he has easy access to surveillance cameras and wiretaps, he has control over the media, and just so much more. He's also able to review any surveillance from just about anywhere because of his information network, putting Light at a disadvantage because he has to go out of his way to be careful about things like this while in public. Now, one could say that while while L's resources are crazily powerful and they certainly vastly outnumber Light's, they're still grounded in reality, so it is easy for Light to counter them, unlike Light's supernatural resources where L is forced to infer his way out of Light's powers. So Light has a weak offense with his limited resources but a strong defense knowing how to counter L's resources, while L has a strong offense with all his resources but a weak defense not having full knowledge of Light's resources. Now this seems fair, right? Well, I think it's unfair in L's favor. Firstly, Light has to deal with Rem, a totally separate threat, in addition to L. Secondly, Light's win condition, finding L's name, is literally impossible, unlike L's win condition, which is finding proof against Kira. Of course, in the end, Light managed to one up L because he is much more resourceful than L, utilizing the few resources he has to his fullest and even using L's resources, like the task force, to his own advantage. With all that said, does the end result of their game actually represent Light's intellectual superiority over L? We'll see. The first theory of intelligence we have is that there are two kinds of intelligence: crystallized intelligence and fluid intelligence. Crystallized intelligence is how well one applies experience and knowledge in order to solve problems, while fluid intelligence is how well one solves problems independent of pre-existing knowledge or experience. For the former, crystallized intelligence, I'd say Light excels in that. L has way too much experience in regards to analyzing and reading people. According to Death Note, another note, he has been in 3,500 cases and sent 10,500 criminals to prison, and that is solely according to the public record. Hell, that isn't even mentioning how he works with many people during his cases, such as police officers Iber, Wedi, and Naomi Misura. With an absolute bare minimum of experience with 10,500 people, anyone with even an average amount of intelligence would be able to excellently intuitively analyze and read people, and we see this when L managed to identify Light as Kira. However, we don't see this when L failed to immediately recognize Higuchi as the third Kira. With a crazily large amount of experience L has with people in general, especially criminals, he should have been able to recognize subtle mannerisms which would make Higuchi stand out, but he didn't even have suspicions to begin with. Meanwhile, Light has far less experience than L does. The most he has is him studying to be a detective while preoccupied with other studies, and when he simply aided the police during 2 cases, which does not hold a candle to L being a detective solving thousands of difficult cases full time. However, he managed to be on par with L in terms of deductive prowess. This is noted by Rem, by Aizawa, and is directly stated in Death Note 1300 Raid. Many people claim this is the part where it said Light and L would have become friends had Light not become Kira, but that's actually a mistranslation. What it really said was that they would have worked on eye level with one another. And I'll link my source, which is a post which discusses this and the fact that it wouldn't make sense for L and Light to work together. So with Light having much less experience than L does and being on par with him, plus L failing to use his experience properly during the Yotsuba case, I'd say Light is better at applying experience, and this is even more commendable because crystallized intelligence increases with age and Light is younger than L. As for fluid intelligence, I'd say L takes a cake here. During the Yotsuba arc, when L was piloting a helicopter for the first time, he's able to learn how to do it immediately, and we even know Light would not be able to do this judging from his shocked reaction. So we know L is better at solving problems independent of past experience from the fact that he's able to learn how to pilot a helicopter his first try, which is really quite fantastic, and is even more commendable when you consider fluid intelligence worsens with age and L is older. So if we believe in this theory of intelligence, then Light and L are equally matched as they both excel in an even amount of areas. The next theory of intelligence is Sternberg's Hierarchic theory on intelligence, that there are 3 types of intelligence: analytical intelligence, creative intelligence, and practical intelligence. Analytical intelligence is how well one solves problems and analyzes them. So in terms of Death Note, this can be roughly measured by one's reasoning skills. Like I said before, it's been noted that they're both equal in that regard, but L has way more experience than Light does. And since I want to be fair and not treat these other factors as mere explanations, Light wins here as he has less experience and is still on par with L, not to mention he's younger. Now, practical intelligence is how well one selects, shapes, and adapts to their environment. Considering Light is much more resourceful than L for reasons I've discussed, and resourcefulness testifies one's adaptability, Light is more adaptable than L, and we see this throughout the series too. Light becomes Kira, so he works that into his schedule, which still involves studying and sleeping. L installs surveillance cameras, so he finds ways to temporarily change things so as to accommodate for that. Rem is bugging the hell out of him, so he uses her as an asset to help him. I mean, sure, you could say this is because we don't get to see L's full potential in that regard, because he's more proactive rather than reactive throughout the battle, except up, we see during the Yotsuba arc that L has severe trouble adapting and is really rigid, it being a noteworthy aspect of his character, with him sulking for months and making no progress in the Kita case, and not accepting Light isn't Kita, which proves how stubborn he is, not to mention the fact that L is a static character while Light develops throughout the story. Finally, creative intelligence is, very unsurprisingly, how creative one is. This has a pretty simple answer, and it's Light yet again, because resourcefulness also testifies one's creative ability. So assuming we are following Sternberg's theory on intelligence, Light is more resourceful as he excels in more areas than L does, and that's, well, all of them. The next one is a theory that there are 9 types of intelligence: linguistic, logical, mathematical, spatial, musical, kinesthetic, interpersonal, intrapersonal, existential, and naturalistic. We can remove linguistic, musical, existential, and naturalistic easily, as we don't see them applying these skills, so we have logical, mathematical, spatial, kinesthetic, interpersonal, and intrapersonal intelligence. Logical mathematical intelligence is how good one is at reasoning, kinesthetic intelligence is how good one is with their body, spatial intelligence is how well one visualizes something, interpersonal is how well one interacts with, reads, or emphasizes with other people, and intrapersonal is how well one analyzes them. For logical mathematical intelligence, Light is superior to L for reasons I've stated twice now. Now in regards to who's better kinesthetically, we'll have to take a look at the tennis game between Light and L. Sure, it's easier to say Light won so he's better, except look at this panel, where Light and L are both facing each other. Have a look at Light, who's sweating like crazy during this intense tennis match, while there isn't a single sweat drop visible on L's face. So this means that L probably isn't really trying all that much, and he probably wants to lose intentionally, probably in order to see how Kiddo would react to such a victory. So since L was holding back during the game, I'd say he is better than Light. I mean, just look at his capoeira skills. In terms of spatial intelligence, I'd say Light is better, because he's clearly better at constructing stuff. See his false drawer trap and the way he altered his watch. Meanwhile, L leaves all the construction and building up to his versatile butler, Watari. Now as for intrapersonal intelligence, this very easily goes to L, who is much more self-aware, he knows he is childless and hates losing, and he knows his motivations aren't really all that great. Now take a look at Light, who fabricates self-narrative after self-narrative to convince himself he's right, with many layers of him lying to himself, this being a key difference between the characters. So, with both of them being better than the other in 2 areas, what is the tiebreaker? And we are left with interpersonal intelligence. I'd have to easily give this one to Light. L is not socially skilled at all, plus he doesn't care about nor empathize with just about anyone really, unlike Light, who's not only extremely sociable but also cares about his family and believes in the redemption of criminals. So Light is interpersonally intelligent more than L is. And with this, Light is more intelligent than L if we take into account this theory of intelligence. And the final theory I'll be tackling is the very first theory on intelligence, and is probably the most common one, and that is the concept of general intelligence, which is that intelligence is just one cerebral ability and there are not many other nuanced aspects to it. It's basically what most IQ tests assess. General intelligence is how well one adapts, reasons, thinks abstractly, how good one's memory is, and how well one learns from experience. You can't really measure how good the respective memories are, nor how much they think abstractly, but for reasons I've stated, Light is better at adapting, reasoning, and learning from experience, so Light is more intelligent than L if we apply this theory. So that's 3 theories where Light is smarter than L, and 1 theory where they are intellectually on par with one another. Personally, I'd say Light is smarter than L, not only because Sternberg's theory is my favorite theory, but also because the theory which has them be on par with each other isn't really all that relevant to the series. In case you didn't notice, I didn't even bother mentioning the Death Note 13 stats, which gives Light 9 out of 10 intelligence and L 8 out of 10, because the stats are absurd. They give Light and L 10 out of 10 creativity, Light 10 out of 10 social skills, Buddy 10 out of 10 sex appeal, and Naomi 1 out of 10 luck. It throws around these extreme numbers far too nonchalantly, which is ridiculous. Not to mention IQ tests get enough hate as is, but to measure intelligence on a 1 to 10 scale is a whole new realm of absurdity. Now, what's the most important thing to take away from this? Well, nothing. Death Note simply isn't a series about who has a superior intellect, it just doesn't matter. It's true Light's my favorite character, but that did not affect my analysis to see who's more intelligent. I ultimately didn't care who ended up being the more intelligent one because this isn't relevant to the series, and you can enjoy a character while simultaneously viewing them as less capable than other characters. I hope you enjoyed and subscribe for similar content.